Hi, friends. This is Terry Squires with today's Nashville This is Faith. I sat down with Justin Gambino, and he shared how he went from breaking into homes to the courtroom to Iraq to Christian music. You won't want to miss this episode. No matter where God takes you in life, you have a mission to reach the world and give God the glory. Justin Gambino is a Texas-based singer and songwriter whose music is fueled by his powerful testimony. Although he grew up in a Christian home, Justin was a rebellious teen who ran with the wrong crowd and was eventually arrested for theft. Instead of jail time, the judge gave him the option of enlisting in the military. He chose that path. His love and music blossomed in the military, and he began leading worship for the fellow soldiers during his deployment in Iraq. Returning home, he was haunted by PTSD, anger, depression, and addiction. This is his story. This is today's Nashville. This is Faith. Justin, it is such an honor to have you here in Nashville. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I have heard so much about your story. It's amazing, and your music and everything that you're doing. But you have such a powerful journey and testimony. Take me back to where it all started.
I can do that. I mean, how far back do you want to go? Do you want to go back to whenever I was 5 years old and I was bringing my Bible to church and strumming on it like a guitar?
Yes, I would like to.
We can do that.
So where were you born?
I was born in Lake Jackson, Texas, which is about an hour south of Houston. Little town right off the Gulf.
So your parents took you to church when you were a toddler?
Yeah, we didn't have a choice. I am one of 6 kids. And
where are you in the mix?
I'm right in the middle.
Okay.
Right in the middle.
The middle child.
I was the middle child, and we were all homeschooled. My mom was I would say that she was a very patient woman. 6 kids and homeschooling all of us, but we never missed Sunday morning church. We attended a little Baptist church down in the Gulf Coast area of Texas, and so I mean, that was the norm. My mom would tell you that I would bring my Bible to church and strum on it like a guitar. I don't remember that, but that's what she would say.
And did you have instruments in the house?
There was a piano in the house, and at the age of 9, my parents signed me up for some piano lessons, but I really didn't take to it. No offense to the piano players, but I just did not like it. It wasn't of interest to me, and so a couple weeks of that, and I just told my parents I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't like the piano. And what's crazy to me now, it was just a few years ago when my dad told me this. He said that the piano teacher pulled them aside and told them, he said, he may not be interested in the piano, but the kid is a musician. And whenever he finds his instrument, you need to nurture that. And he saw that at the age of 9, just after a couple weeks of me not liking the piano.
So when did you get your first guitar?
It was 6 years later at the age of 15.
15.
A friend of mine that I did homeschooling with, best friend of mine, his name's Timothy. He got his first guitar whenever I was about 14 years old at the time. And every time I would go to his house, I would not put his guitar down. I'd just keep picking it up, and I'd ask him to, just teach me a couple guitar chords and a strum pattern, and I would just strum away and not put it down. And I think, at least in my mind, I like to think this is how it went. He complained to his mom that I was always picking up his guitar and not putting it down. And then his mom went to my mom and said, maybe you should think about getting Justin a guitar for Christmas. And that Christmas, I was 15 years old, got my first guitar.
What was it like opening it up?
Oh, I mean, I saw the shape of the guitar over in the corner. I just knew it was for me, And so opening up, I was just the excitement was already there. I kind of already knew what it was and that it was for me because I was picking up my friend's guitar every single time I'd go over to his house. So it was pretty awesome feeling to get my first instrument.
Well, growing up with six and being the middle child, tell me what it was like in that family situation.
There was never a dull moment. All of us we were either there. I would say about 2 out of 6 of us were like just never getting into trouble, and I was one of the 4 that were always getting into trouble. So I was either like pointing at my brother, he did it, or disappearing before someone found out that I did it. So it was. I would say it was like a organized chaos, to say the least. 6 kids. I mean, whenever I was born in Lake Jackson, I mean, we were living in a 2-bed, no, it was a 3-bed, 1-bath house right before my youngest brother was born. So there was 5 kids, my parents in a 3-bed, 1-bath house. Yeah,
And all homeschooled.
all homeschooled.
So I read that you, at one point, started making some wrong decisions. How old were you?
I was 17.
17. Were you a believer at this time, or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, going to church my entire childhood, that learning about Jesus and what he did for me was something that I was just used to, and I think the knowledge of Christ was there, the knowledge of God was there, but at that time it wasn't a personal relationship. It wasn't a relationship that I had with my Father, with my Heavenly Father. And so I think that is what made it a little bit easier for the enemy to get me off track, because the more and more I've been sharing this testimony, the more I realize the same year, the same age that I got my first guitar was the same year that I got my first job. And that is whenever I got introduced to a completely different crowd than what I was raised around, which was the youth group and other people in the church. So I think the enemy was really paying attention. Whenever the Lord put that guitar in my hands, knowing what he called me to do, the enemy was paying attention, and he put other people in my path to trip me up.
Do you feel like you were sheltered?
Yeah, I would say so. To an extent. My mom still allowed us to go to all the homecoming dances, the prom dances. We were still getting invited to go to those events at the public schools. And so my mom allowed us to do that, but she drew the line at us attending public school. So she really wanted to teach us herself.
So what was that moment that you changed your life, and not in a good way?
That would
when you started making those wrong decisions.
Yeah, I was just hanging out with the wrong crowd, and before I knew it, I was getting mixed up in doing the things that they were doing, which was partying on the weekends, and then I would show up for church the next day, and then that started turning into making the poor decisions of breaking and entering and committing theft and burglary. And that led to me standing in a courtroom. That's whenever everything started. For me, I started to realize that, okay, I've gone too far down this path, and there's no getting out of it.
Were you with friends when you were doing this, or?
So-called friends?
Yeah, so-called friends.
So-called friends that I thought
they introduced you to it.
They introduced me to it, and I just wanted to fit into a crowd that I didn't fit into. I just wanted to fit in, and I wanted to be accepted, and that's what led me down that path.
What was going through your mind when you were breaking in?
I think I was just blinded to the sin that I was committing. I felt, of course, you feel that rush of adrenaline, and in that moment I knew that I wasn't supposed to be doing that. I knew that it was wrong, but what really mattered to me more was fitting in with that group of people, and I don't know why. It's just something that the flesh wanted.
Well, God had a different plan for you when you stood before the judge. And we're going to talk about it when we come back. Justin, tell me about the time that you were breaking and entering, and you knew that this would probably be the last time you were going to do it, that you were going to stand in front of a judge. Do you remember that time?
I remember the next morning, because I was still living at home at this time. And I was a horrible criminal. Like, I was not good at lying. And the next morning, because I came home late that night, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning is whenever I showed up. My mom waited up. And the next morning, all the stuff that we stole, which was money, all of it was sitting in my trunk. And the next thing I know, the cops show up at my house. And I'm lying straight to their face. I'm lying to my mom that's standing there next to me.
What was going on inside of you at that time?
I mean, if I was hooked up to a lie detector, they'd be like, this kid's lying. Because it would be all over the map. And my heart was racing, and they were telling me that they had me on camera, and I was like, you don't have me on camera. I was just lying straight to their faces. And all at the same time, I was just feeling this flood of conviction. So the Holy Spirit was convicting me, and I was trying not to make eye contact with my mom that is staring a hole into my into my soul. And so whenever I showed up at the police department later that afternoon with the money, I was like, I lied to you, and I'm coming clean.
So was it the Holy Spirit telling you to do that, or did you just?
I think the Lord was convicting me through the Holy Spirit, 100%. It wasn't like I told my mom and confessed to her. I just remembered. I did confess to her, but it wasn't like I confessed to her and then she said, well, you need to go down there. I'm like, I don't want to go down there. It wasn't like that. I just remember telling my mom, listen, this is something that I did, and I need to go down there and make this right. And so I remember going down there with my mother, and I remember that the police department, they were already off my tail. They were already deciding that it was someone else, because they believed my story.
So they didn't have you. Yeah, they didn't have you on camera.
They didn't have me on camera. I think they were just bluffing, but it worked. So they got me. And so I went down there, and I remember, I can't remember exactly when or how much time had passed between committing the crime and then standing before the judge, but I do remember that it was the first week of July whenever I stood before the judge.
So they didn't arrest you right away, and you didn't go to jail or anything like that?
No, they were pretty lenient on me.
Okay.
I would say that they were pretty lenient on me. I was riding in the front seat of the cop cars, and they didn't put me in handcuffs, and my mom was with me a lot whenever, this was all going on. And
how old were you?
I just turned 18.
Okay.
I had just turned 18, partying on the weekends with my friends, and I was abusing alcohol and smoking, and you name it, sex before marriage. I was just going down a deep, dark hole. And I remember my mom sharing this story with me whenever I got booked at the police department or at the sheriff's department. This was after I saw the judge, because the judge said, listen, well, let me back up just a little bit, and then I'll get to the story about how my mom was really upset when she saw me at the sheriff's department. She saw me sitting on the bench rather than sitting in a cell, because she was mad that they were that lenient on me. And so, but let me back up a little bit. I remember being before the judge, and the judge looking at me, and kind of like you are now, you're curious about the story, curious about the backstory. And so here's a judge that has never seen me before, and he's looking for a record that doesn't exist, first-time offender. And he said, okay, tell me about yourself, because I've never seen you before. You've never done anything like, there's not a record on you. So why don't you tell me about yourself? And tell me if both of your parents are in the picture. Who brings in the income in your household? And so I started answering these questions, and it was almost like you could hear the gears in his head turning. And he made a decision that day. He said, listen, I'm going to give you a choice. You can have a felony on your record. You stole enough for it to be a felony. So you can have a felony on your record and go to jail today, and you could probably get out in 6 months if you're on good behavior. But I'd also like to give you another choice, another option, and that is join a branch of military, do a lot of community service. You're still going to have to go down to the police station. You're still going to have to get your mugshot taken. It's going to be very uncomfortable. You've never done anything like this before. They're going to have to take your fingerprints and all this stuff. And so I took that second option, join the military. But whenever they took me down to the sheriff's department to book me, they never put me in a cell. So they just have me sitting on this bench, kind of like in a holding area where they already taken my fingerprints, they've already taken my picture. And my mom comes down to the sheriff's department and she was like, "Why is he just sitting there on the bench?" Like, "Well, we're just booking him in and booking him out. Like, it's gonna be a really quick process." She said, "No, he needs to feel the full consequence of this. Put him in the cell over there and handcuff him." And my mom was just, that's how my mom was. Like, we never got off easy. She was tough as nails, but also loved us very much. It was all out of love. And she wanted the best for me. And
did she already know your choice and what you chose to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
She did. And so fast forward, so this was 2004 whenever I saw the judge. And there was a little bit of a waiting time between being in the courtroom and then actually deploying to, or actually leaving for boot camp, which was August of 2005. And so that's whenever my contract actually started with the U.S. Navy.
So tell me what happened within that year, and did you behave yourself?
Oh, I did. Yeah, I would say that I did because that was a huge wake-up call for me. And I knew that my time at home was short. It was limited. You know, my time with my friends was short and limited. So I hung out with friends that were a good influence on me. I was still going to church. I got a job that kept me busier, and which was actually a job with my dad. He was in sales and petrochemicals out in the Dow Chemical area, and so I was a helper at an epoxy coating company, and so that's what I did. I worked 12 hours a day, and so whenever I got home from that, I was just too exhausted to think about anything else but, going to sleep and writing some music, and so.
Well, then we're going to talk about it in a minute. God took you to boot camp with your guitar.
It wasn't boot camp. It was, but you're kind of on the wrong track.
On the service. In the service, and turned your life completely around. But you still had some issues.
Still had some issues then, yeah.
And we're going to talk about that when we come back. Justin, let's talk about your life in the military.
Okay.
What did God do?
Well, for me, before I went in the military, I was picking up my guitar a lot. And so I really thought that going into the military, that my dream of doing music was just out the window. Like, it wasn't, I knew that the choices that I had made were going to lead me down a path where music wasn't even an option. And so in 2005, went to boot camp, followed up by A school, and just after, maybe like within 3 or 4 months of getting assigned to my first duty station, which was in Texas, they said, "Hey, we're getting ready to deploy to Iraq." So by end of 2006, so and this is maybe like within 3 or 4 months of my first duty station, they told us that, and they said within the next 6 months we're starting to deploy for Iraq. And so,
what was going through your mind then?
All sorts of things, because again, this is maybe 5 years after 9/11. And so whenever all of these horrible videos of these killings and capturings were, hitting the internet, and so there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of regret. Yeah, I would say that I regretted a lot of my decisions, at that time, because those were some of the consequences of my decisions. That now I'm having to serve out this contract where I wouldn't have to be if I didn't make the decisions I did. But that's where I was. And so it was about halfway into my deployment in 2007. It was middle of the summer in Iraq. So it's like the heat is unbearable. It's like in the 120s. And I remember it was on a Wednesday, and every Wednesday the chapel was open for service. first half of the deployment, I never went to chapel. But that night, there was just like a tug on my spirit to go to the chapel that night. I went, and there was maybe a group of 12 of us at this chapel on this particular night. And the chaplain asks all 12 of us if anyone knows how to play the guitar, if anyone can volunteer to lead worship. And so I didn't want to raise my hand at first, because I'm just thinking, okay, I'm not going to raise my hand. Like, no way God is out here calling me to do this, because, at this point, I am just upset with myself, the decisions I made, and I'm just sulking in that. And so, but I do go back to the call center. I get on the phone, and I call my dad, and I ask him to send me my only guitar, the guitar that they bought for me. I'm 21 at this point, so 6 years, 6 years prior, they bought me this guitar that's just collecting dust at home. And, I wonder sometimes what the feelings of my father were, hearing the voice of his prodigal son calling home, saying, Dad, that and he, I recently got to ask him that too. And what he told me was, we were praying for you when you left. And it's like, we took a deep breath in, we were praying for you. And then whenever you called and I heard your voice, I knew that God was doing a work, and it finally felt like I could exhale. And so coming home from that deployment, dealt with a lot of depression and anxiety. I turned to drinking to numb all of the just the things I experienced over there, and then the feeling of seeing everyone back home take for granted what I used to take for granted, but now I have a different perspective coming back from a war zone like that. And so anything would make me angry at that time. So I dealt with a lot of anger, and I'll just numb it all with alcohol. And so this is 2008 through 2010. And 2010 is whenever a mentor of mine invited me to this Bible study where, again, the Lord was pursuing me again through people. And he said, why don't you bring your guitar and help me lead worship? That's whenever I started writing songs for the Lord. And a few years later, I married my wife, Ashley. A couple years after that, I quit my job and I start doing music full time. So now, things are starting to roll with the music. Things are starting to almost like like that snowball effect. It just starts moving and you can't stop it. And so we all know what happened in 2020 whenever everything shut down, everything started canceling. And I would have to say that, 5 years in doing music full time, I knew that God had called me to do music, but I would say that I was blinded at the same time because I was so focused on making a name for Justin rather than pointing people to Jesus. I still believe that the Lord was glorified in the concerts and in the recording sessions and the music was pointing to him. But at the same time, I was losing sight of trying to get to that next step. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wrote a song called Courage. Mm-hmm. And it's taken, you are a man of, great courage now. Can you play a little bit of that for me?
I would love to. Yeah. Yeah, you want the verse chorus?
That would be great.
Yeah. Well, this one kind of sums up my days of, mistakes and the days of, everyone has ups and downs in their life, right? But always important to take courage and just to keep pressed forward, have perseverance. There are days when I start to lose sight of who I'm born to be. And the voices inside of my head, they start to believe. They say that I'm going nowhere, and where I am I don't belong. But something inside my heart says they're wrong. I won't give up, I won't lose hope. As long as you're breathing this air into my lungs, I won't let go. And I'll stand tall, I'll stand my ground, knowing that you're fighting on my behalf. My courage I found, yeah, my courage I found.
I love that song.
Thank you.
Here you are, you were playing Worship for the Soldiers.
Yeah.
God is bringing you all the way full circle.
Yeah.
Tell me about one of the greatest things that he was able to show you.
I was talking about how everything slowed down in 2020. And I remember being in Salt Lake City, October 2020, and the Lord says, I want you to go back to your hometown and do a night of worship and a revival at the courthouse. And I was thinking, at the courthouse? I don't want to do it there. I have bad memories there. But fast forward a couple months later when we're doing this event, I thought that I was doing a revival and doing a night of worship that the community needed. But really, it was a personal revival for Justin, because here I am on this stage. And in that moment, the Lord said, Justin, I know that you came up here 16 years ago feeling helpless and hopeless at the end of your rope. But I want you to know that the same plan I had for you then, 16 years ago, is the same plan that I have for you now. The only difference is that I have your full and undivided attention. And that's when I started writing this new record.
Oh, that is powerful. Justin, thank you so much. I know you're going to bless so many people.
Thank you for having me.
My friend, do you have a choice to make? Like Justin said, you can do it man's way or God's way. But if you take God's hand, He will lead you down a righteous path. This is today's Nashville. This is faith.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.